The 70s was a time of rock and roll, disco, and much more. Many events shook Americans. The first event was Nixon opening up the trade routes in China. By opening up the trade routes in China, that meant that we could get produce that we were not able to get before. The second event is the Vietnam War ending. By the Vietnam War ending in 1974, that meant that American troops could come home. The third event was that the last spaceship was sent onto the moon in 1972. This meant that Congress was cutting off NASA's funds, saying that people had lost interest in the moon. In America, in the 1970s, many domestic events changed Americans' lives. The first one was Nixon taking us off the gold standard. The gold standard was the selling of gold to the U.S. Treasury for $35 an ounce. If the U.S. was to take back the gold standard today, our debt of $16 trillion would only be reduced by 3%, meaning that only half of $1 trillion would be gone. The second event was the Watergate scandal. Nixon was not the first president to record his tapes at the White House. Tradition started with Franklin D. Roosevelt and many other presidents. The only reason why Nixon's tapes differentiated from the others was the fact that the tapes were activated by voice and not by manual switch. The tapes gained interest when Alexander Butterfield testified on live TV. The Watergate scandal led to our third event, Nixon resigning. Nixon knew that the Democratic Party was holding a meeting discussing him being impeached. Instead of going through the long and treacherous impeachment trial, he decided to resign instead. The first president to ever resign. Some of the pop culture of the 70s included Monday Night Football and Saturday Night Live being introduced. The big rage of the 70s was the bell-bottom jeans. Some of the cool music that had just been introduced was the Beatles and Elvis. Unfortunately, Beatles broke up in the 1970s and Elvis died in 1977. The 1970s were a time of technological advances. In 1970, the first floppy disk was invented by Alan Sugar. In 1971, the microprocessor in the VCR, or video cassette tape, was invented. In 1972, the word processor and Pong, the first video game, was created by Nolan Bushnell. In 1974, the popular Post-it notes were invented by Arthur Fry. In 1975, the laser printer was invented and the push-through tab on a soda can was invented. In 1978, the first artificial heart, Jarvik 7, was invented by Robert K. Jarvik. In 1979, cell phones were invented. The Cray supercomputer was created by Seymour Cray. Sony introduced Walkman, and Scott Olson created rollerblades. My video is inspired by this clam chowder at the Fisherman in San Clemente, California. There's nothing better than the beach.